Among the many people whose music has been an inspiration to me, one name stands out: James Marshall Hendrix. I've chosen to start this video with a picture of his mother, as references to her feature in a number of his songs, and her death when Hendrix was 15 had a massive impact on how his music developed later. Whilst people normally think of Hendrix as the crazy bloke who played guitar behind his head or with his teeth, and had some very loud songs, there is far, far more to the man. Knowing, however, how picky the Hendrix estate is, I recommend people look up songs I name, as the Hendrix estate is notorious for pulling down music by him. With that said, if I turn somebody else onto the man's music, I'll be very glad. Many people are aware of how Jim found fame by traveling to England with Judge Chandler of the Animals and seriously terrified Eric Clapton. Fewer people seem aware of the musical apprenticeship he served as a sideman for various acts in the US. He was the Isley Brothers' guitarist for a period, and they recorded a song called Testify that features Jimmy's guitar playing heavily. Little Richard was reportedly less impressed with him and fined him for lateness and not wearing the correct uniform on stage. It is easy to laugh at this, but black acts like Little Richard had climbed to the top with difficulty. Their audiences expected a professional quality, and Jimmy's guitar playing and general stage presence was seen as an attempt to upstage his employer by some people he worked with. The Isleys seem to have been somewhat more relaxed, and Ernie Isley's guitar still carries on some of Hendrix's tone, but also has a voice all of its own. No presentation about Jimmy would be complete without mentioning the blues. To understand Jimmy, you need to understand the blues, and in particular people like Albert King and B.B. King. The last few seconds of music are the introduction to B.B. King's majestic piece of music, Sweet Little Angel. The elastic string bending and control of tone all of the three kings of blues music were capable of was one of Hendrix's greatest inspirations. You can also hear shades of more rural blues musicians such as country blues style playing at times in his style. Hendrix was, however, something of a musical magpie and listened to everything. There is a famous interview with him when he lived in London after he became famous, and his record collection had music from Bob Dylan, who he was obsessed with, and everything from obscure jazz records to country and western. His time on the Chitlin circuit also saw him playing behind numerous acts that were huge in the 60s, such as Ike and Tina Turner, Little Richard, the aforementioned Isley Brothers and others. This is in part why his rhythm playing was so well developed compared to many of the British guitarists he encountered when in London. Having a wide repertoire of chords and the ability to use them was essential when playing behind these acts, and exact timing was valued. Hendrix only recorded 4 albums in his lifetime. 3 were recorded in the studio. The first of these, Are You Experienced, still sounds radical in spots even now. The guitar assault on I Don't Live Today, which is Jimmy's fierce summing up of issues facing Native Americans, is relentless. Its visceral attack never lets up. The strange backward swirl of the eponymous title track and unsettling lyrics, which suggest people limit their own experiences so as to avoid the awkwardness of seeing other views of reality, is undercut by a trippy feel throughout. Here are some of the lyrics of that piece. I know you probably scream and cry that your little world won't let you go. But who in your measly little world are you trying to prove that you're made out of gold and can't be sold? Songs like Foxy Lady draw on Jimmy's huge library of chords. Remember, which is one of Jimmy's lesser-known pieces, features a lovely use of tremolo and other effects to create a feeling of a waterfall of sound. The album still sounds fresh and challenging even after over 55 years. Axis Bold as Love was the second album by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. It starts with a strange disjointed wave of noise called EXP, which is supposed to evoke a spaceship and aliens. Jimmy's love of sci-fi was always apparent on his albums, and Third Stone from the Sun on his previous album had aliens coming to the conclusion no intelligent life lived on Earth, but chickens, and destroying the planet. Axis Bold as Love features a lot of influence from Jimmy's time on the Chitlin circuit. This is there in all his albums, but is perhaps strongest on this one of the trio of studio albums he possessed. Songs like Wait Until Tomorrow feature funky chords. There is also a raw and searing track in the form of Little Miss Lover, which is full of swagger and brag. This is another track by Jimi, which is not all that well known, but deserves a lesson. For me, the standout tracks on the album are Little Wing, with its delicately arranged chords, and Bold as Love. This song plays with synesthesia by comparing colors to sounds. Overall, this album is more mellow, although it does have some tracks which are what a modern audience would call bangers. Electric Ladyland is commonly regarded as Jimi's magnum opus. A sprawling double album which infamously was issued with a cover full of naked girls without Jimi's approval. It is the source of several of Hendrix's best-known songs, such as All Along the Watchtower and Voodoo Child's Slight Return. However, the lesser-known tracks, such as the very long-form Voodoo Child, which is almost a 15-minute history of the blues, are grandiose and sweeping in their ambition. The fact they live up to that ambition is what makes the album a classic. There is also a sign of Jimi's growing fascination with jazz in the track Still Raining, Still Dreaming. There are a number of studio jams with Jimi working alongside jazz musicians such as John McLaughlin, and Miles Davis was impressed by Hendrix as a musician. Electric Ladyland is a hugely impressive album in the history of rock music. More importantly, it is a hugely impressive album in the history of music, full stop. Band of Gypsies was the last album by Hendrix released in his lifetime. It is a live album recorded at the Fillmore as part of a New Year's concert. Its outstanding track is Machine Gun. Earlier at Woodstock, Jimi had said more about the state of the American nation via his version of the Star-Spangled Banner than a million protest songs could. Machine Gun is 12 minutes long, and in those 12 minutes Hendrix conjures up the instruments of war onomatopoeically from his guitar. There are other brilliant moments of guitar playing on the album, but this song towers above everything else on it. Jimi's posthumous releases are something of a mixed bag. Rainbow Bridge is decent, although the awful movie it is a soundtrack to his best watched as curio from another era. All that saves it is about 20 minutes footage of Jimi playing live. Anything by Alan Douglas from the 70s is best avoided for the most part, as Douglas used session guitarists to overdub studio masters, and some of these have tones which sound jarring. Of Jimi's live concert work, his appearances at Woodstock, Monterey, and Berkeley are outstanding. His Isle of Wight appearance is worth watching as it captures him less than 3 weeks before his death, but it is not his best moment. He looked tired and ill at ease, and the equipment was prone to constant malfunctions at this concert. There is some fan footage of Jimi online at his last concert in Germany. Although it is somewhat amateurish, it is worth a look. Jimi Hendrix died aged 27 in London in Notting Hill Gate. He was with Monika Daneman, who was a German figure skater who later married Uli John Roth of the Scorpions. He was fatigued by this point and had a number of issues he was trying to rectify, particularly his relationship with his manager Mike Jeffrey. Jeffrey was an odd figure, reputed to have ties to the Secret Service and Mafia. However, how much of this was Jeffrey playing up his own image and how much was reality has long been debated. His relationship with Jimi had become acrimonious, and Hendrix was seeking to escape his ties to him. On his last night, being unable to sleep well, he took barbiturates and drank some wine. Alcohol and this drug, as with most drugs, are not a good mix. The coroner eventually recorded death by vomiting due to an overdose. Jimi was originally buried in a modest grave near his mother. However, in a controversial move in recent years, his half-sister had his remains reinterred in a far more grandiose tomb. His surviving bandmates and many who knew him felt this was a blatant cash grab. However, Hendrix's true memorial is his music. He is one of the talents from the 60s who still sounds fresh and alive even now. Perhaps had he lived he would have burnt out like so many musicians from the 60s, but he remains forever young.